Hey everyone, I'm Cory Simpson. It's good to be with you. And as always, thank you for investing your time with us. And I'm excited about today's conversation. For those of you that may be new to ICIT, let me tell you a little bit about it. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan 501c3. Our mission is to modernize, secure, and make resilient critical infrastructure that provides for foundational need. We are dedicated to being a resource for organizations and communities that share in our mission. And everything we do, every initiative, every project, every piece of work is made possible by the unwavering support of our community of experts, donors, and partners. Their generosity fuels our mission and brings our vision to life. Today's session is a part of an ongoing series with global cybersecurity and national security leaders, public officials, and critical infrastructure stakeholders. We're focused on the front line where geopolitics, politics, cybersecurity meet, and the lessons we can learn from allies and partners as threats to the United States infrastructure continue to grow more urgent. We're honored today to be joined by my good friend, Assaf Harel, a renowned Israeli legal expert in cybersecurity and privacy, a former senior legal advisor to the Israeli Defense Force. Assaf now leads the cyber and privacy practice at Gornensky and Company. I may have gotten that wrong. You could correct me, Assaf. And then it's one of Israel's premier law firms. Assaf also serves on Israel's Public Privacy Council, where he helps shape national data protection and data governance policy. This conversation comes at a time that is particularly urgent. Tensions are escalating in the Middle East, specifically between Israel and Iran. Assaf joins us from Tel Aviv. And U.S. cybersecurity authorities are warning of spillover attacks on American infrastructure, allied partners around the globe, and understanding how Israel protects its critical infrastructure from both cyber and other threats is absolutely vital to improving all of our security postures. This is a strategic, legal, operational discussion that's enabled to do just that. We've got 30 minutes for today's discussion, so we're going to dive right in. Thank you for all those that submitted questions in advance. And if there's anything that sparks up, please follow up. But don't hesitate to reach out afterwards. We'll welcome the continued dialogue. Assaf, again, thank you for joining us. I apologize for being late. But maybe you could start with just a little bit of an introduction about your background with cyber, the military, and maybe how things are where you're sitting right now and the current state of things. So with that, I turn it over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Cory. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for inviting me to this conversation. Before we dive in, I have to say that the views and opinions expressed in this webinar are my own and do not necessarily reflect those of my firm or of the National Privacy Council. So, Cory, as you said, I was a legal advisor in the IDF, focusing mainly on public international law. That's actually the context in which we met a while ago. And in the past 10 years, I've been with Gornitsky & Co., where I lead the cyber and privacy practice and advise a wide array of clients, both global and Israeli, on cybersecurity laws, regulation, commercial aspects of cyber, as well as privacy and related tech regulation. To give a bit of background and context to our audience today, I'd like to say a few words about where we are in this Iran conflict. So first of all, Iran and Israel have no border, no shared border. Actually, about 1,000 miles separate between the two countries. But since the Islamic Revolution in 1979, Iran adopted a declared ideology that Israel should be wiped off the map. And Iran coupled its statements on the need to destroy Israel with a program for developing nuclear weapons. Now, against that background, on June 13th, 2025, Israel launched a preemptive strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. And following that strike, in the past 2 weeks, Iran fired hundreds of ballistic missiles and hundreds of drones against Israeli targets. Now, Israel, as you know, is a small country. It's about the size of New Jersey. So that means nonstop rocket fire alarms day and night to a population of 10 million. And most of those attacks targeted civilian targets and residential areas, including academic institutions, hospitals, etc., killing 25 civilians, including children and families that were killed in their homes. On a personal level, I can say that as a father to two young kids, this was definitely a challenge. And we've been through challenges, COVID and October 7th, etc. It was rocket alarms day and night, no school, and the feeling that basically you need to prepare for fast deteriorations, disruptions in power, food, etc., and to protect your family. And in addition to that, people I know and work with lost their homes or suffered severe damage to property. Luckily, yesterday, a U.S. brokered ceasefire entered into force, and things are starting to get back to normal. I'm back in the office today. So that's the general background, and now we're ready, I think, to dive into cyber.
We no, Assaf, thank you. I know conditions are hard. I appreciate you making the time to do this. And Israel is really a unique piece of earth in that it's been under threat for a long time by neighbors that are a lot closer to the U.S. I like to say that we have big giant moats on our east and west, and we have friendly neighbors to our north and south. That is not the case with Israel. So it's had to think very differently and practice very differently about its national security, its strategies. Just maybe give us, as we try to take some lessons learned. I mean, the last time there was a flare up with Iran, um, in Israel, Iran started targeting civilian water facilities within the United States. They thankfully, did not attempt to like change chlorine levels or alter the chemical makeup of the water for the towns that they impacted. But it was a psychological warfare. They left a message that said everybody that is an ally of Israel will be targeted. So maybe help. So many in this community want to learn the lessons. Like, how do we better think about this? Prepare ourselves, prepare our families, our communities, and then the infrastructure that connects all.
Right. So actually, Israel and Iran have a long history of cyber attacks. There was Stuxnet in 2010 that it was attributed to Israel, perhaps also to the U.S., and caused physical damage to centrifuges in the Iranian uranium enrichment facility in Natanz. And over the years, basically in the past 5 years, multiple Iranian cyber attacks on water facilities in Israel, including an attempt to manipulate chlorine sensors to basically poison water, poison drinking water, and also attempts to disrupt water pumps. And another type of critical infrastructure that the Iranians constantly attack is hospitals. So basically, multiple hospitals were hit in the past a few years, causing leakage of sensitive data, disruption of systems, the need to actually start and work back from pens and papers in providing treatment to patients. So this is quite a challenge, but again, it prepares you for challenging scenarios. And there's also been a quite a rise in cyber attacks on Israeli targets since October 7th, 2023 when the Hamas attack was launched against Israel. And in particular, in the past 2 weeks since the current conflict with Iran began, we've seen certain types of cyber attacks focused on Israeli targets. So first of all, we've seen quite a few of attacks that targeted security cameras, basically home security cameras, private cameras that were used by the Iranians for espionage or monitoring missile strike impacts to understand where the Iranian missiles hit and how successful the attack was. In response to that, Israel enacted emergency regulations that allow the military or national security agency to infiltrate and disrupt privately held cameras. Pretty broad authority to handle those types of threats, but again, something that is important from military and defense related context. In addition to that, we've seen quite a few disinformation attempts. Iran has executed mass text blasts on false fuel shortages, bomb shelter warnings, and use of deep fakes and things of that sort. For example, there was a message sent to millions of Israelis that regional bomb shelters are the subject of a terrorist attack, and therefore that people should, avoid the bomb shelters, causing panic and trying to inflict more harm. And we've also seen a spike in attacks on Israeli websites, denial of service attacks, defacement of websites, etc. On the other side, there were, of course, attacks that allegedly were attributed to Israel. There was an attack on Bank Sepach and on the Nobitex crypto exchange. But I have to say that, it appears that we did not see the full potential of Iranian cyber attacks on critical infrastructure during this conflict. We didn't see, a significant disruption of power or water shortages. We didn't see, a real cyber disaster in that regard. And one possible explanation for that is that Iran shut down nearly 97% of its internet access across the country, potentially to counter cyber exposure, and this may have made it difficult for Iranian groups to effectively target Israel. In terms of lessons learned from the current conflict, and let's say from the past 2 years of growing attacks on cyber infrastructure, I can say that IoT vulnerabilities is something that the government identified as a potential threat, and in that regard, there are the powers I mentioned in the emergency regulations, but also, a need for smart device hygiene as a lesson learned from, in that regard, because when you're using IoT devices, cameras without proper cybersecurity protection, this of course could create exposure. In addition to that, the Israeli government has put a strong focus on digital service providers. So basically, any provider of computing platforms, storage, database management, cloud storage, of course, and cybersecurity services. And in that regard, the government understood that those service providers are prime targets for cyber attacks, among other reasons, due to their high level of connectivity with numerous entities across the economy, both public and private. And the understanding that basically a significant cyber attack on, let's say, a cloud provider could cause a widespread damage if it affected the connected clients of that provider. So in that regard as well, the government enacted the emergency regulations that allow the cyber directorate to provide the instructions, cybersecurity instructions to such digital service providers to demand certain data, cyber attack related data, to allow for forensic investigations, and also impose reporting obligations on such providers, both to the cyber directorate and to the affected customers. And this is believed to deal with let's say a very strong a potential leak here that could affect the economy as a whole. One other point I wanted to make is that the Israeli government also promoted in the past year widespread cybersecurity regulation that applies to many companies in Israel and, of course, to the public sector as well. And this was done actually through privacy-related legislation. So basically, what the government did is it promoted regulations that allow the government to impose fines for breach of data security requirements with respect to databases that contain personal data. Now, the idea of expediting the treatment of this legislation was that once we have companies implement data security requirements with respect to databases that contain personal data, we will benefit from a higher level of cybersecurity in general in Israel, in a manner that could help thwart all kinds of attacks, even those not, targeting personal data databases. So these are kind of the main lessons learned in the past year or so. And there also, of course, is the psychological warfare issue. As I mentioned, there were many attempts to disseminate fake news and false information. And in that regard, I think another lesson learned is the need to prepare the public in advance to fake news and to be able to effectively communicate with the public in real time when those instant messages are sent, trying to act like they are sent from home front command or government, etc.
I there's a lot to unpack there. I'm gonna start. So thank you. I'm gonna work at sort of the highest level, and one that I'm not gonna call it a tension. I'm not gonna call it a paradox. Other people can call it both, but and I'm not gonna say there's a trade-off, because reasonable minds may differ between like privacy and security, access and vulnerability, or access and security. Um, Israel is known, the startup nation. It's known for its tech talent. It's known for its capabilities to be able to contribute to the digital ecosystem, the cybersecurity realm. Some of the pioneering companies have come out of there. How just in the construct where you have adversarial nations so close, where they're doing things like hacking into civilian cameras to do what in our world we would do battle damage assessments for civilian targets. There's so much wrong with so many pieces of that, but in preparing to defend against that, I can also understand the population still wants to have a sense of privacy, some individualism, and being able to balance those things. It's just hard. And I know this is an area that you work right at that intersection all the time. So how what advice would you have, or how would you frame it for those of us that are thinking about it in the context of, as America begins receiving greater geopolitical threats. We're living in the most dangerous world that we've seen since World War II. There's more active armed conflicts today in the world than in any. I mean, the world is at war. America, to this point, has not been holistically dragged in. We still have the global war on terror. We, of course, participated in partnership with our ally Israel in a bombing campaign against Iran, but like we have yet to fully enter the fray. And as we begin thinking about this, how have you balanced those big things from maybe a legal construct, a technical construct, whichever you're most comfortable talking to? I imagine it's the legal one.
hmm yeah, naturally the legal side. So basically, privacy in Israel is considered a constitutional right under Israeli law. And also the Supreme Court in Israel has the power to strike down laws that are non-constitutional. And I think that the essence of protecting civil liberties when you're under attack is to find the appropriate checks and balances. And those checks and balances can be different, in times when you're under attack and times when you're not under attack, and could, include various elements. For example, limited time frame for certain regulations. The emergency regulations that I mentioned each have, a expiration date, meaning that they're not unlimited in time. They can be extended from time to time. You need parliament approval for extending them. In addition to that, other checks and balances could be reporting requirements to, let's say, the Attorney General or to a parliamentary committee. Um, uh, the ban on, making any use of personal data. So, for example, if we're talking about the digital providers, one of the concerns was that, the security agencies could, go to Google or Microsoft or whatever, and obtain a lot of data in a manner that could endanger the privacy of the population, or let's say endanger commercial secrets of companies. And in that regard, the regulations, for example, impose a criminal offense on any use of personal data in the context of carrying out the authority given to the cyber directorate, NSA, etc. In addition to that, they set a limited time frame for data retention. So there are certain checks and balances. I can't say that it's perfect. I mean, again, you're in the middle of the war, and it's difficult to preserve a level of civil liberties that is equal to what you have when you're not at war. But you can find the right balances for that situation.
Yeah, I two things on that, and then we've got about 5 minutes left. So I do want to get the opportunity to give you some closing thoughts. But one, just in the context of intellectual property, you brought it up, the trade secrets, whatever that is. The U.S. has not been very successful in preventing China from, wholesale leveraging that. I mean, some people have called that the greatest transfer of wealth in world history. And you're like, just for those listening in, Israel has not had that problem. So I think we can, with wholesale theft of IP by China. So maybe we can learn a thing or two about how to develop systems to better protect those secrets. So I'll just kind of park that there if you want to address it in a minute. But I was listening to a piece. Henry Kissinger did a book with Eric Schmidt. It was one of the last works he did before his passing. And he did an interview and in that interview, he said, in the past, nations went to war over territory. We're certainly still seeing that today. Russia, Ukraine. That will be omnipresent, I think, as long as humans roam the earth. We'll fight over terrain. But he said what the next big conflicts will be over, and his prediction was data. And when you have somebody with that stature talking about something as new to the scene as data, it really should shape how our political leaders think about it, how our geopolitics interact, and how we think about securing that resource. And so with that, we did. There's a kinetic piece to this that I wish we had more time to explain that Israel faces, unique from the US. But what we both share is a pretty persistent barrage of cyber attacks on things that are arguably at the core of the value to our economy and increasingly to our future, which is data. So what are steps that you would think through as we face this increasingly dangerous world for better protecting that resource? And then again, and I get it, the pulling it's very difficult to manage the need to access data with the need to secure it. And it's just that there's a trade-off there. The most secure systems in the world have very limited access. And the challenge with data is if you're going to get the benefit of it, you need a whole bunch of people to be able to access it. But you need the right people to do it, hence privacy constructs. So with that, I turn it over to you to share any thoughts. We have about 3 minutes left, and any points you would like to make.
Sure. So essentially, I mean, we're facing the same issues, the same threats, and cybersecurity is always a challenge. I mean, you can't protect everything. You can't. You'll always be vulnerable, and that's the default, let's say, default position on any cyber related discussion. And the question is, where do you focus your resources and how do you minimize the impact of attacks once they occur? Now, in that regard, there are a lot of efforts that are being carried out. I mentioned, the privacy related data security regulations that, provide a, let's say, national security, certain cybersecurity level contribution. There is also the issue of awareness, raising awareness of companies, of individuals. I can say that in Israel, the cyber directorate approaches companies in its own initiative to flag that those companies are the target of a cyber attack or are of a potential cyber attack, and that they should take certain steps to protect themselves. And this relates to basically public-private partnerships. So essentially, the government needs the cooperation of companies, of the private sector, of cybersecurity companies, and the general public, and of course digital providers to implement certain cyber protections. And the private sector also needs the capabilities of the government with its resources, to provide intelligence, to provide advice on certain issues. So it's a balance and it's a cooperation and a mix of different elements that together could provide a better level of cyber protection.
That's incredibly insightful. And you struck on something that I really like. It's a very nascent notion right now, in at least U.S. I'll just say the U.S. government ecosystem. Probably not as much in the private sector. but recovery capabilities. We spend, like, if you look at the amount of spend we do on prevention and detection, and then you look and the exquisite capabilities you have, but we're 30 years into these massive markets, and they don't prevent everything, they don't detect everything, and so you need to develop recovery capabilities. And that is something that is really a nascent notion here, and something that I believe, as we head towards, you're going to get hit, and the ability to get back up and get back to mission is absolutely vital. So that recovery capability, that really resonates with me. Assaf, it's good seeing you. As always, thank you for your time today. I know our viewers and really learned a lot and appreciate it. We'll be following up with any questions that we receive from the audience. And with that, stay safe and thank you.
Thank you.